Welcome to this second video about classes and objects, and this will be very short. I just wanted to show you a different approach to classes and objects than perhaps was mentioned in the book. A class, again, by definition being a blueprint, and this is more the style of programming these days, what's called object-oriented programming. You need to make sure that the big 5 vocabulary words, at least for now, class, attribute, methods, objects, and instances, are under your belt as you pursue Chapter 3. Class is a blueprint describing what something looks like along with its data, called attributes. We think in terms of nouns in the English language, along with the actions that the class can perform, and those are called methods. We think of those in terms of verbs or verb phrases. The creation of something from that blueprint, if we actually make a cookie from the cookie cutter, if we build a house from that blueprint, we refer to these in programming as objects and sometimes instances of the class. I showed an example in the previous video of something called Student 1, which had characteristically the person's name, their GPA, and the number of hours credit that they had. And I want to keep this simple just in terms of coding and in terms of working with it in these videos. The variables are referred to as private because we only access this information not directly as we do with regular variables, but we access these items through methods that are created. The traditional ones that are set up are called set and get. Set name, set GPA, and set hours are places where we'll actually store the information in the object that's created by the class. We pass the information in through something called a parameter. I just used the first letter of the word to make it easier, so I chose M because name starts with M, N rather, G because GPA starts with G, and H because hour starts with H. You don't have to do that. You can call them modulary and curly. It doesn't really matter. The way you get the information, instead of doing the regular printout, is we use some methods called get. Get name, get GPA, get hours. I'm reinforcing this just to be safe on review. These are described as string data, double data, and integer data respectively rather than void as was done up here, because in these particular methods, gets, we're going to return information to the main program so it can be stored in memory or it can be printed somewhere. I wanted to show you how this would look in a Java program as well, just to let you see how this works. What you'd actually do, and this just depends on which version of Java you're doing, what you do not want to do and what I will not accept, do not type these in a word processor and send them to me. You've got to execute these in some kind of Java software package because you're not doing programming otherwise. This is a particular Java programming package that was in on your CD for the book called Eclipse. There are many of them out there, some very simple ones, and I don't care which one you use. It's totally up to you. But here is the first class defined called public class student 1, and it's maybe hard to see. Hopefully it's not too hard to see. Sorry about the small printout. But I've got everything typed in. You can even type this in Notepad and copy and paste it if you want to. And you would, in my case, you would simply save this information. You would simply save this project, and then I would have in a separate coding, not together, but as one program would be the student 1 defining or describing the class with no main or printouts in there, and one called show student, which is actually where I defined JavaDude as I did in the last video and assigned 24, Michael, and 3.7 to the various private variables and then had it printed out. And when I run this program, if I go ahead and run this application, and I'm doing this from Eclipse, the printout for me would be at the bottom of the screen. I think it scrolled around. What you have to do very carefully, you can't just run show student. You've got to run both the class and the student program. You have to run both of them, because if you run this one first, then the computer has no idea that there is a class out there called student 1. It has no idea, so you have to run that one first. So you'd run this program, and you won't necessarily see any bells and whistles because there's no, and again I've already run mine, that's why it's doing what it's doing. It won't show anything when you first run it, but once you run show student, when it recognizes that there's a class out there called student 1, you want these to be in the same directory, then you'll see the information here at the bottom of the screen that prints out the phrase. Sorry, sometimes the noise gets crazy out here even when you're recording. It's going to do the regular print line, the student info is, that I put in quotes. And again, the only way I can get the name, GPA, and get hours is to actually call up those methods, get name, get GPA, get hours, and it will print that out. So the output is going to be the student info is, and then Michael 3.7, 24. How did it know that information? It's because I had set those values earlier in the program. And I hope this helps out. A lot of this is visual and hands-on when you start looking at classes as far as getting used to understanding it. Another way you can do this, which is not necessarily recommended, and some of you are going, oh my gosh, he's going to confuse me. I promise I will not confuse you intentionally. Let me copy this stuff over here to another part of the screen, and pardon me if this makes you dizzy. I apologize for that. I wanted to make as much visual as I could for you. I want to show you a variation on this. It's the same program. I've just called the class student 2 right here, with the same private data, the name, GPA, and hours, the same set and get methods that are there, all 6 of those. Only this time what I've done is I've added 3 more methods to it. I've got one that's called show name, show GPA, and show hours. Now, because it's not returning anything to the program like get was, I made them void. And what I did is I put the system.out.println inside the class, which is perfectly legal to do. So all I have to do here, and maybe I can isolate this sentence to give you an idea. When I've got JavaDude set up, and I call this student 2 because I've got a brand new class, and I've set 24 and Michael and 3.7 as the GPAs. But if I were to call up this procedure, I'm thinking another language, sorry. If I were to call up this method called showName, here's what would happen. JavaDude, as you already know, has Michael 3.7 and 24 associated with it. So if I were to call up the method called showName, it would simply go out here and say, it would print out the phrase, the name is, and anytime, of course, I change from something in quotes to something in memory, I've got to separate those with pluses, and it will print out the name associated with that class. And again, it's okay to do it this way because I used a method, and once I'm inside that class's methods, I can go to the private data. So this would print out the name is Michael. If I were to do javadude.showGPA, it would print out the phrase, and I spelled this wrong, sorry, gap. The GPA is, and because this is not in quotes, it would print out 3.7. So I have another way of developing these methods if I want to do something called show. I'm not restricted to just set and get. I can have as many methods as I want to have in the program. So I hope this gives you a little, an even better feel now maybe for how this works.